tutorial today based on some new filigree pieces that we got from Greece. This is a tutorial on brick stitch. So I'm calling this filigree brick stitch earrings. It's going to be how to attach and get the brick stitch onto different parts of a filigree piece. You may have a filigree piece already that you want to work with, and this is just kind of going over the basic brick stitch and how to attach to that filigree piece. And I thought these were fun as a pair of earrings. A lot of times when you're using the brick stitch, if you want to get some color onto these filigree pieces, and this, for example, is the antique brass color. When you're doing that, to get some color on them and to not make them even heavier, I just used a couple seed beads. And something fun too, I could have gone the whole way around the project with a set of seed beads, and I'll show you how to start and stop and do different sections along it if you want to do that as well. If you want to make these brick stitch filigree earrings, we'll put a little link to all the different products below the video in the published date, which is the date below the video. If you hit that show more button or the down arrow, it'll give you links to all of these different products from me online. For this, you are going to need 2 filigree pieces. Doesn't matter if it's the same pieces as this, you just want something that has filigreed holes fairly close to the exterior of the piece. So you can see I'm grabbing on to a bunch of these different areas of that filigree. In addition to your 2 filigree pieces, you're going to need 2 of the solder jump rings or split rings, 2 ear wires, and then I'm using a 6mm Czech glass pearl at the very base of the project. I went back and forth with putting a tassel on the bottom too, so you can kind of change it up if you want. But I'm just doing pearls for a more classic look rather than going so modern with that tassel. You can always also add that after the fact too if you want a longer pair of earrings. So 2 6mm beads is what we're going to attach to the piece. Again, this is very, very much a technique tutorial, so you can do this with all kinds of different materials, all kinds of different beads. I'll be using 11O Miyuki brand seed beads as I teach you how to do this. I have the gunmetal, the metallic dark bronze, and then the dyed orchid color. For my thread, I am using 0.006 wildfire beading thread in the black color. In addition to that, I'm using a size 10 beading needle, and you're going to use about 5 feet of thread for both earrings. In addition to that, to hold my pearl in place, I have 1 15-0 on each project. So you'll need 2 15-0s if you want to make a pair of earrings. This is also nice for a pendant and kind of changing up the look and the design that you have. I have a couple earrings that I've done that I've gone the whole way around the filigree piece, and I've also done it even with like split key rings that you see. So you may start seeing things that have that rounded frame shape or this filigree shape that you think, oh, I get ideas and I can make this and kind of make it my own, and that's really the point of this video. To get started, we are going to start with our baseline here on the filigree piece. I have my thread attached to my needle, and I'm going to lay out my seed beads. Go ahead and get your needle and thread ready to go, and then we'll get ready to show you how we attach to the start of the filigree piece. I also forgot to mention, if you have one handy, a thread zap or a thread burner is great to use because we are going to be burning down thread at the start and the base of the project. So to get started, the filigree piece here has some openings. I decided that I wanted to sit so my little swirls there are sitting side by side. I'm going to start at the bottom, and I want it to be very consistent. I'm going to start by adding 3 threads in this upper portion. Right below the little cursive letter L there, I'll have 4 threads, and then to the right of it, I'll have 3 more threads. I want to make this identical to the other piece since it is a set of earrings. With my thread on my needle, I'm going to the end of the thread, and I'm going to put it through the first section of my piece, which is right there on the end. Take it to the end of that section, and I'm simply going to tie an overhand knot. And I apologize for you, my fingers are a little bit stained from processing some apples and applesauce. So for those of you that say something. All right, so there we have the knot on, and I've just done a double knot to knot the thread onto the piece. You can see I kept it towards the exterior portion of this actual piece. If you're not familiar with brick stitch, you may want to watch my brick stitch video before going in and attempting it on a filigree piece. When we start brick stitch, we have 2 beads that we put on our needle. Each row of brick stitch is going to start with these 2 beads. The 2 beads are going to slide down next to the filigree piece. I'm going to take my thread and needle through that same section of the filigree piece. Kind of push those beads to the back, making sure that the first one is the first one to the left and the second one is to the right. Go back up through that second bead, which is going to force the bead to sit with it on its end. Give a nice tight pull, and those 2 beads will sit right inside there. You can see then it creates that starting line. Another bead goes on the brick stitch. Let that go down to your piece. Sew through that center section again. And if I could have gotten my needle in there, I would have gone into that section, just to let you know. Go back through the bead, going back up, and the thread's coming out. At this point here, I have my first 3 beads on. I really want to put another bead on here, but I don't want to link it the whole way up to the L shape. So I'm going to end up linking it. The thread is going to sit a little bit to the side, and wherever I have the thread exposed, I like it to be as even as possible. So I like it to be very, very consistent. I'm going to add my next bead, let it drop down next to the filigree piece, go through that center now, and I also like to go through the piece the same direction, so I'm always sewing up through the piece, back through the bead that you just put on, and pull that nice and tight so that thread does come a little bit over to the side. Another bead goes on through that center section, and then back up through that bead. I'm going to end up with 4 beads in this center section. Brick stitch is one of those things that takes a little bit of practice when you're doing this here to make sure that you get the spacing correct. I want the beads to sit right next to one another, but I do not want them overlapping. If they start overlapping, it's too tight and it ends up making a mess further along in the project. After putting on each bead too, I give a tight pull to make sure that that thread stays as consistent as possible. I'm going to put my 4th bead on here, going through that center loop again, back through the bead and out towards the bottom to make that bead stand on its own. You can see it somehow got twisted there along the second or the 3rd bead, so I'm going to relax it a little bit. Make sure to get that other bead out of the loop and make sure that it's sitting nice and in place. So now I have 4 threads that are going to be right along in that middle section. That's the exact same as the other piece over here. Continuing on for consistency, I'll add 3 more beads that are going to link on to the left of the, or the right of the L. And you can see after that first brick stitch where you put on 2 beads at once, it's always 1 bead. Brick stitch naturally is going to go into a V shape as we add more beads to the row. So I'm just finishing up and letting you watch here, getting my last bead in place. I'll push that down just a little bit. That last bead's going to sit right up, the thread line is going to sit right up there near the next piece, or the next little filigree area. And there you have it. So you can see I have 3, 4, 3 pieces. 3, 4, 3 pieces. I want to make it match. As I start with row 2, I'll get my bronze beads out here. And starting row 2, you're again going to add 2 seed beads. Move that gold one out of the way. 2 seed beads go onto the thread and needle. you're going to skip that first bridge line. You can see kind of that little bulge there. That's the thread going from the last bead to the second to last bead. We're going to skip that one because we're adding 2 beads. So underneath the second bridge thread, after adding my 2 beads, the first bead is going to kind of sit up, but almost just hang out there at the end. And then we're going to sew up through that second bead. Give a nice tight yank and let those sit nicely against one another. As we come back and add our third row, it'll help to make that first bead sit correctly. Again now, we're going to add a bead, go to the next bridge thread right there, sew underneath, and go back up through the bead. Give a nice tight pull, and that bead goes in there. Again, naturally, we're going to go from having 10 beads to now 9 beads because we're working with the bridge threads. So there's 9 bridge threads that are linking those 10 beads. So you've got your 4, or your 3, your 4, and then your 3 beads, and then the bridge threads in between. As I continue along this line, I'm going to be adding, like I said, 9 beads, which is going to make 8 bridge threads for the next row. So like I said, it's naturally going to do that triangular effect because you're naturally downgrading. If you don't want that natural downgrade, instead of skipping over the first bridge thread in each row, you're going to go through the first bridge thread in each row. What that will make do is that first seed bead will kind of hang off to the end. So if you wouldn't want it to go triangular, you're going to want to go on to that first bridge thread rather than skipping it. As I go in the last bridge thread there, I'm adding my 9th bead in place, going back up through that bead, making sure that tail is kind of out of the way and that I'm not sewing into it. And I just finished then my second row. On to the third row. The third row I decided to do the bronze again. 2 beads go on, skip the first, go into the second bridge thread. Go up through the second bead and out through the top, making that bead sit straight up. So I'm going to continue with this brick stitch then, downgrading by adding 2 at a time, always on your first row of your brick stitch, and going into that second bridge thread. After this brass color, I'm going to do a color line of that dusty rose, and then, or sorry, that dusty orchid, and then back to gunmetal, 2 more bronze, another rose, and then I'll come back because we'll start to really be downgrading from our wider rows of thread and beads to a lot more narrow, and I'll show you how we make sure those sit correctly. But it's basically, once you learn this brick stitch and about the spacing and getting it nice and tight without them overlapping, it really is a fun stitch that you can do so much with. I love it especially for earrings. I love to play with the brick stitch and forms like this filigree piece, as well as completely open forms. So I finished that row, and now I'm going on to the next row of the orchid beads, and I'll put 7 of those on the next row as I continue to downgrade along that filigree piece. Now that I'm at the point that I'm down to 3 beads, I'm going back to my brass and I'm going to pick up 2 beads. So because I only have 2 beads to add, we're going over to that second bead, just like we've been doing, and then going back up through the second bead and out. As we add the last bead then, I'll add the last bead, which I decided to actually use a little fancy square bead. Excuse me. So that little fancy square bead is going to go on. And then because it's only one bead, if I go through the bridge thread, it's going to expose it. Instead, I'm going to go right in to my glass pearl here. From there, and pick up that little 15-0 seed bead that I had. Back through the glass pearl. And then from here, I'm going to go back through that little gold bead. And at the same time, I'm going to go underneath that bridge thread. Pulling nice and tightly then. It's going to get that piece right sitting straight. I'm going to reinforce then by going back up through that little gold bead, which could have been another 11-0. It didn't need to be that little fancy brass bead. Out through the glass pearl, through my seed bead, back down my glass pearl, and once I'm back down through my glass pearl then, I'm coming out right after the glass pearl, if you can. My needle really wants to go through that gold bead. So I'm out right after the glass pearl. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a sewer's knot. So I'm going to take the thread around the glass pearl, create a knot, pull the thread through the knot, and then just knot right between the gold bead and the glass pearl, pulling a nice tight knot. There's not going to be any tension on this, so then I can take my thread zap and my thread burner, burn that thread edge down, and burn that really close and flush next to the pearl. Back here at the top then, that starter thread, same thing. Burn it down. Nice and tight, right against the project. You won't really even see it. And I'm using black. I could use white or silver or green. I'm using black so you guys can see it the best. At the top then, I'm going to repeat what I did at the bottom. Instead of doing the whole area at the top, I wanted to keep it more simplistic. To keep it more simplistic, I'm just starting with my center. So I'm starting at that L on the other side, doing 4 right along the center. To start, go through the filigree piece, just like we've been doing, and tie the thread on. 1, 2 knots. If you want, you can even do the sides too, that you could do a little bit of decoration on the sides. So I have my 2 stitches here on, nice tight pull, move that over to the starting side, pick up my thread and needle, add 2 beads at once, and then go through my filigree piece. Back up through, and that's as easy as it is. Just start off then, moving those along the side, getting my 4 beads in to that opening filigree area. Once the 4 beads are there, then it's easy. We repeat, and we do 3, 2, then 1. My pattern is I did the 4 in this gunmetal color. Then after the 4 gunmetal, I did 2 rows of the brass color, and then 1 single of my dyed orchid. The only thing about the top here that you need to make sure, again, is that your threads along the top are going in order and that they're not crossing over one another. Give a nice tight pull, you have those 4 beads on, and then continue nice and quickly, adding on 2 beads, going to that second bridge thread. And it's hard to do on camera. I usually kind of sit the piece straight up as I'm going through, so if you're having a little bit of a hard time actually seeing that brick stitch kind of in action, it's hard because I pinch the beads to make it the efficient way, and then I'm usually holding it kind of coming up straight at my head. That's how I'm the fastest. So I have the 3 beads on, 2 more beads go on, skip over to the second and final bridge thread, go up through the second bead, on goes my last pink bead. From here I put the pink bead on, and instead of adding the pearl, I grab my split ring, go through my split ring, let that hang out there on the right side of the bead, go back through that pink bead then and sew underneath that middle bridge thread. That will hold that pink bridge or that pink bead right in the center. Go back up through the pink bead then, through my jump ring, back down through the pink bead. To end this piece of thread, I'm then going to take the thread and needle down the entire left side of the triangle. So I'm going to go down through 3 beads, 2 bronze and my 1 of my gunmetal. Sewing straight down. I'm going to take that thread to the back of the project because the 2 thread ends are here, and simply tie the end of the thread. Once I'm done that, I'll burn down the threads, add my ear wire, and the fun filigree brick stitch earrings will be all finished. These may be my go-to kind of holiday present this year, is looking around for really pretty filigree pieces and doing a bunch of peyote stitch on it. I chose the 11OC beads just to give you an idea because they are about the same width as, or the same thickness as the actual filigree piece. So they're right about the exact same when you look at it. So if you have a thicker piece, you may want to go with 8/0s, or you can even make it look really pretty with 15s. Keep in mind with the 8s, you won't have as many thread lines along the piece because the beads are naturally bigger. With the 15s, you'll have more thread showing. So again, ear wire just goes on and it is good to go. So again, this point of this video is really to inspire you to look around, to see what pieces you have, to start looking at pieces and saying, I could totally do that, and also to give a kind of revamp and a new identity to a lot of your jewelry making, which may not include some of these metal pieces and may be primarily seed beads. So this is a fun mixture of the 2 different techniques and the 2 different styles of beads using the filigree piece and the seed beads as well. Like I said, it's very, very teachable and very much a technique thing that you can really change up and have fun using this technique and changing up the beads that you're using. Again, if you need any of the materials to do these filigree earrings, go back to the beginning of the video where I listed it out. Also below the video, there's that date stamp that has the different beads available for you in that show more box. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel to get regular updates when we get new pieces, new ideas, new videos ready for you. You can also purchase from me at PotomacBeads.com and stay connected with us in Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest, as well as joining our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. There you'll get the first look at a lot of new products that we're having, share inspiration and ideas from other designers and other people that love the art of making jewelry, and just really get tons and tons of great inspiration in that group. As always, thank you so much for watching, and have fun playing around with some filigree pieces, adding on your brick stitch.